Greetings, gentlemen and ladies. I'm the Crypto Game Snob, and in today's video I'm taking a look at the best and the worst god powers currently in Gods Unchained. These get changed quite frequently, it seems, but we're going to take a little review at the way things are now. And today we're going to talk about the god powers as they were. Number one, kicking things off with Death. Now, Death has a soul burn, which deals 1 damage to both gods. This is an excellent god power. Why? Because it allows you to trigger Frenzy anytime you want. You have no front line to go through. You don't need creatures on the board. For the low price of 1 mana, you can trigger Frenzy, which will then grow you up more zombies, or basically trigger any sort of frenzy effect. Anything you need to have frenzied for 1 mana, you can trigger that with Soul Burn every single turn. Yeah, Soul Burn is an awesome god power, just really good and really strong in a lot of Death decks. Next up, we have Blood Ritual, which you see occasionally played, not as frequently as Soul Burn, but this can be useful for basically destroying your own creatures sometimes, for triggering their afterlife effects. You can see this in some board wipe Death decks. For example, in particular, you can see these in board wipe Death decks. That's exactly what we're looking at, 95.3% usage in board wipe Death, and that is specifically to be able to trigger a lot of the afterlife effects that some of the board wipe Death deck relies on. I won't get into the details of that. Blood Ritual can be very powerful in one of the most powerful decks that you can play, one of the most expensive decks you can play too. Man, this deck I think costs around $6,000. Give or take, like 1.5 Ethereum or something like that. Crazy. Next up, for 3 mana, we have Neferu's Sacrifice. This is probably the worst of the Death god powers. Draw a card and take 2 damage for 3 mana. The thing is that Death has so many options for drawing cards, so many cards that can draw cards, that Neferu's Sacrifice seems kind of like an expensive card draw. It's kind of like an expensive spend for drawing a card. I guess if you got nothing better to play, maybe Neferu's Sacrifice. I'm sure there's some niche decks that would make use of this, but I would say Neferu's Sacrifice, the weakest of all the Death god powers. Soul Burn, probably the strongest. Blood Ritual, obviously the strongest in board wipe Death. Anyway, that's Death. Okay, let's move on to Nature. Now, in my humble opinion, as a nature-focused player myself, Flourish, all of the god powers for Nature are kind of meh. We used to have Flourish, which was awesome, which gave +1 to attack on your creature, and it also regen them for +1, and it only costs 1 mana. Flourish used to be awesome, then they nerfed it. Now all it does is heal one of your creatures for 1, which could be very occasionally useful, very occasionally, but almost never. Flourish, yeah, it almost never sees any play because it's just not enough of an advantage almost every single time. It's just not enough to basically give you a favorable trade or whatever the case may be. Flourish is very meh. Then we have Selena's Mark, which is also quite meh. You deal 1 damage to a random enemy creature and heal your god for 1, now dealing 1 damage. Now, dealing 1 damage to a random enemy creature is not really significant, and oftentimes it totally misses the mark of where it's supposed to go. Occasionally this can be useful. Healing your god for 1 is not the worst either. Selena's Mark is it's a very medium god power, almost not even medium. I would not even call this lukewarm. Selena's Mark is passable because there's not a better option, really. I mean, well, the other option is Animal Bond, which is just barely a better option. This is probably the best nature god power at the moment, and it's not really good. For 2 mana, you get a 1/2 Badger. So of course you're getting more creatures on the board, but it's about as weak as can be. A 1/2 Badger for 2 mana. The bang for your buck there is not really great, and the problem with these little tiny badgers is that a lot of nature decks rely on randomly buffing creatures, right? So you drop down the aspect of Pangolin, or you drop down what is it? I can't remember, but some of these random buff cards, and you get them on your little badger, and they're basically the card that you least want it to go on, I think is what I'm trying to say there. So Animal Bond is okay. I would say at best it's like a 5 of 10 in terms of how good it is. There are some situations where you just want to spam out a lot of bodies on board, potentially. You know, if you have like a Bladefly focus deck with some with some falling stars and various other things, and you just want to get out a ton of creatures and also put out like a wildfire or something like that. There are some occasions where Animal Bond might even be considered good, and it can also be good to just have another body on the board to distract from like random attacks, like a lightning attack back at you or a canopy barrage or something else that hits a random target. Having another creature on the board can be good, but all in all, man, nature god powers went from being the best to kind of being amongst some of the worst, in my humble opinion. Next up, we have not Zoo Light, we have Light, just Light, which has Summon Acolyte, which is a 3-mana 2/2 creature, which is solid. Those 2 strength creatures are really good for Light because Light has so many buffs that are specifically for 2 strength or 2 health creatures, so that 2/2 Acolyte just falls into line, helps Light to build up its board. That being said, a 2/2 3-mana creature is not a great bang for your buck. If you're playing a regular card at 3 mana, you should be getting about 3/4 stats, so 2/2 is kind of a scrape in the bottom of the barrel maneuver when you don't have something better to play. But when you don't have something better to play, at least it's something, and then you can buff that up later. So all in all, a solid medium card. Not too bad, not too good, not too bad. Very solid medium. We have Heal, which is a decent card as well, especially considering that Light has a lot of synergies that trigger with Heal, a lot of effects and bonuses that trigger with a Heal effect. And so for 2 mana, you get 2 healing. This is a solid little buff. This has been in the Light god domain for as long as I've been playing. There's always been a Heal 2 for 2 mana, as far as I can remember. Anyway, yeah, unless they changed that a little bit, but I'm pretty sure it's always been Heal 2 for 2 mana. Solid, not amazing, not terrible, solid. Next up, we have for 2 mana, we have Lysander's Honor, which gives -1 strength to an enemy creature. I mean, I suppose this could be very, very situationally useful, very, very situationally. If you needed to bring your opponent's health down by 1 for some other card, I don't know. Generally speaking, I think this is probably the worst of the Light God powers. There may be some niche applications for it, but this is one I have never played against. I don't think I've ever played against, so it kind of goes to show how popular it is, really. That being said, it does get a little bit of play. It's I guess in on one side of the coin you could say, all right, -1 strength every turn to your opponent's creature, but that's not a whole lot of damage reduction. It's really not. It's fairly desperate to have to use Lysander's Honor, unless there's like some certain specific Light deck configuration that really takes advantage of that, which I'm not really aware of. There might be. There probably is, but yeah, I don't know. I don't play Light as much as I play some other gods. So next up, we have Deception, and Deception actually basically has a lot of good options. Flip is cool. You draw 2 cards and then shuffle 2 cards into your deck. So basically, yeah, you can, if you don't like what's in your hand, you just switch it out and get something more that you need, right? So Flip can be very good for getting what you need into your hand. You have Thievery, which adds a 1 mana card from your opponent's domain into your hand. So that's a lot of fun. For only 2 mana, you get a 1 mana creature or some card back from your opponent. That can be very interesting, very good. And then we have Orpheo's Distraction, which is just awesome. It deals 1 damage to a creature, so it can be used to pop wards. It also gives the enemy creature hidden. So if this is put on a front line, it can actually go straight through. It can allow the rest of your cards to go through that front line, effectively nullifying your opponent's front line. Orpheo's Distraction has a lot of good applications. Very good god power. Generally speaking, I like all of Deception's god powers. They're all useful. They're all useful, especially when they're matched up with certain deck configurations. But and I nearly forgot to add one of the most powerful uses of Orpheo's Distraction: using it on your own creature. To give your own creature hidden. You can buff up your own creature so that it basically has a massive attack on it with something like what the hell is it called now? Something like Assassin's Aim or something like that. Buff up your own creature, keep it hidden so your opponent can't really deal with it very easily at all. You just keep hitting your opponent in your face. It's very dirty, very powerful. Generally speaking, they all have some degree of usefulness to them. Compared to some of the other, nature, for example, really suffers in finding any value in a lot of the god powers. I find myself almost not even playing nature god powers when I use them, and then on the other hand, I always like Deception god powers when I play them. They're always kind of interesting and kind of potentially useful. Next up, we have Magic, which has a 1 mana Clear Mind. Now this has been severely nerfed from what it used to be, what the equivalent used to be. It used to get Protected and Foresee for 2 mana. Now you get Foresee 1 for 1 mana, so I guess this can help you to shuffle through your cards a bit. If you're looking for something really specific, 1 mana is not too expensive. It's not the worst, but yeah, it's far from the best. It's like I say, everything is deck configuration, and there are some situations where Clear Mind and shuffling through your deck to get to a certain thing could be very useful. But generally speaking, you almost never see Clear Mind played. I think it's very underpowered. Mage Bolt is okay. Deal 1 damage for 2 mana. This is basically what you see Magic playing, and I think that's because Magic lacks a better option. Honestly, 1 damage is not great. You do get to target which creature you attack, which is nice, instead of like the randomness of Nature's 1 damage spell. But that being said, 1 damage for 2 mana is not your best bang for your buck. Not even close. You can of course use this to trigger a Frenzy though, because it just deals 1 damage. It doesn't have to be a creature, so you can trigger Frenzy with this if you decide you need a Frenzy for something. But yeah, Mage Bolt. It's probably the better option for Magic, but not amazing in my humble opinion. Next up, mana 3, Palace's Genius. Add a random 1 mana magic spell to your hand, which would be cool. I think this would be a lot better at 2 mana, right? If it only costs 2 mana, it would be very good. At 3 mana, it's very expensive for just a 1 mana spell. I mean, you have to be pretty desperate to want to play this one. Yeah, but I mean, basically for the cost of 4 mana, you get 1 single 1 mana random spell. So yeah, I far from love it. I don't like it. I don't even like it. I don't like it. I get, it's not the worst, but I definitely wouldn't choose it over Mage Bolt in the vast majority of instances. Next up, we have War, which has Enrage, which gives 1 strength and deal 1 damage to one of your creatures. This is, I guess, not the worst because you do get that. You do get it for only 1 mana. But War has a lot of low hit point creatures that couldn't take advantage of this. A lot of even 1 hit point creatures that would basically just die when they get this. A lot of high damage but low hit point creatures. I mean, it's kind of not too far off from Nature's Flourish. Getting 1 damage can help to give you a favorable trade a lot of the time, or at least give you a trade, an equal trade. A lot of the time it's not the worst, but yeah, dealing 1 damage and getting only +1 strength. The War players tend to play Slayer, because Slayer is actually very good. Deal 2 damage to your opponent's god for 2 mana. This triggers Frenzy. And there's a lot of cards that War uses that require a Frenzy to be triggered, so being able to trigger that at will, and also just to be able to whittle down your opponent's god 2 damage at a time, reach through any sort of front line, just be able to reach their face whenever you want. Slayer is, I would dare say, War's best bet by far. And then we have Volka's Presence, which in my humble opinion is absolutely atrocious. For 2 mana, you get a 1/1 Raider. Yeah, like I say, 2 mana, 1/1 Raider. You should be getting like 2/4 stats for 2 mana. So this is a pretty desperate option here if you have to play Volka's Presence. I can't see many instances where it would be better than Slayer. Maybe there are some, but yeah, Slayer is actually very good. It is at least very good. And that's a quick look at all the powers, kind of in a nutshell, how I consider them. To cap things off, for Death, we have Soulburn, which is probably your best bet unless you're playing Board Wipe Death. Then Blood Ritual might be the way to go. For Nature, Selena's Mark is okay, Animal Bond is okay, but far from anything to write home about. For Light, we have Heal, which is okay, Summon Acolyte, which is also okay, but again, far from anything to write home about. Nature, on the other hand, has this game-changing Orpheus Distraction, which can be awesome. The formerly known as Cheat, which is probably a better description for it, because it often feels like that's exactly what Deception is doing when they use Orpheus Distraction. Thievery, kind of cool. Flip, also kind of cool. Some good options for Deception. Magic, like I say, Mage Bolt, probably your go-to in 86.4% of instances, well, at least with this deck, but Mage Bolt's probably your way to go. And then War Slayer, War, it's synonymous. Slayer, War Slayer. That's the way to go. Okay, hope you guys have enjoyed this video.